So it's been a while since I've done a video on TL, and you might be wondering why that is. Part of it was because I didn't feel very good for the last week and still don't feel that great, to be honest. Also, we had some leaks and data mining that was coming out that did not look good at all for this project, and it confirms a lot of the negative rumors we had from the final test and from the internal Amazon alpha, that there's a lot of issues with this game, and I don't think they're getting fixed before this game launches. With the Korean CBT officially launching and people streaming it on Twitch, we are seeing that the combat is truly terrible. I just can't describe it in any other way. To me, it's some of the worst combat I've seen in a PC MMO in forever, and quite possibly could be the worst I've ever seen. And autopathing, auto combat, auto hunting, auto gathering was in the data mining. I haven't seen that yet, but I'm sure it's probably there. It's all there, and there's no limitations like people are saying, well, you have to farm mobs 5 levels lower than you, at least in the Korean version, which they keep saying the Korean version and the AGS version are going to be pretty similar. This is NCSoft's words many different times. And even in the data mining, there was offline autoplay found, which you can unlock with the season pass, which of course we haven't seen yet in the streaming, which might not be in there because there's a lot of things they pulled out. They were going to have a full open test, is what they had alluded to, and that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a max level of 30. They said they stripped a lot of things from the cash shop, so really not seeing a lot of the game. The secrecy continues, but the cat is out of the bag on the core game not being very good. The auto hunting, like I said, there seems to be very little restrictions. I've seen players at level 12 or 13 killing level 12 or 13 mobs, and there's no real issues as long as they had enough potions and had that set to auto use. They were fine. So pretty much you can autoplay the game if you're sitting in front of your computer and making sure you have enough potions. You don't really have to play the game. Now, if you want to walk away, I'm sure eventually, you'll probably run out of the potions and you'll eventually die. That's the only real limitation so far on auto hunt. Some people are saying, well, when you get higher level, then, that 5 level difference might kick in. And that might be the case, but I still don't think it's limiting enough at all. And talking about the cash shop, we haven't seen much of it yet, but when players have activated the season pass, they seem to get a lot of things, a lot of consumables and potions, and all these things are useful for, you guessed it, auto hunting. And the real pay-to-win stuff, to me, is probably not in there yet because NCSoft, again, they got scared and they pulled a lot of that. And they mentioned that in the blog post right before the test launched. Some of you guys might think I was super excited about this MMO, and as such, I might be highly disappointed right now. And to some extent, I am disappointed in the amount of work I put into covering this MMO. That does appear to be completely wasted now. But my hype for this game has always been fairly subdued, and this project has never really made it into my personal top 5 most anticipated MMOs because we just didn't know enough about it, and because, well, it was developed by NCSoft, who has a bad track record. Some in my position might succumb to the sunk cost fallacy because of all the time I've invested into covering this, but that is a mistake, and you have to learn when to let sunk cost be a sunk cost and move on. And that is exactly what I'm going to do with this project. NCSoft just appears to be completely out of touch with the modern MMO fan base. Very few people are going to see this combat and actually like it. I had some small hopes that after the negative feedback from the final test that they would be fixing combat and the auto combat issues, but clearly they didn't, and the rumors about this game that came from the test now are confirmed to be true, and it is very sad that NCSoft has done this. I feel especially bad for the devs, who I want to emphasize are not the ones to blame. The devs are told to make a product to a certain specification, and they do that. The game designers might have some influence, but even they are likely pressured by the studio lead and those above them to create a certain type of game that the suits view as best. So they are the ones to blame, those that are in charge, the higher-ups at NCSoft. And it is sad to some extent because there are some nice features in this product. The day-night, the seasons, and the graphics are all pretty good, although the graphics are crazy unoptimized. So I've seen a lot of these streamers, they have to turn their graphics way down in order to get a somewhat decent frame rate. Also, the sieges and PvP stuff on paper sound cool, but we haven't seen it, and I don't know if we're even going to see it in this test because it only goes to level 30. And that brings me to the idea that NCSoft has been so close closed with this project and not willing to solicit feedback. And now I think it's just too late. They're likely not going to delay this game again. I don't see it happening, not with Blue Protocol already being pushed back. I think the state the game is now is pretty much the game we're going to get, and I think we're getting it fairly soon. I certainly think there's a balance that needs to be found in terms of how closed a project is. Throne and Liberty has been incredibly closed, and I think that is a mistake because player feedback is important, and that's how you find what works and what doesn't. That being said, player feedback can be a tricky thing. Back in the day, devs had to rely on forums and players posting there. Of course, players posting on forums are typically very angry and loud voices that are not necessarily indicative of the consensus opinions. Luckily today, there are many different ways devs can gather more reliable feedback with a large sample size and not just from the loud, angry minority. In-game data collection can tell the devs what parts of the game are being interacted with the most or the least, which can be incredibly valuable feedback. During tests, surveys to gauge interest levels and ratings of certain in-game systems can give feedback with adequate sample sizes to actually be useful. So it can absolutely be done, but the way NCSoft is approaching this game, they don't appear interested in doing that. Instead, they look to be launching the game the way it was designed, with very little feedback being considered. And as I've said, I really think that is not the correct approach, and that's playing out with what we're seeing. The better approach is to solicit feedback once the game is in a playable state, and then slowly iterate on systems until you find the right balance. And then you have the other end of the spectrum. You have games like Ashes of Creation that have a very open development, which I think is also a mistake because showing systems in a very rough early state is not useful for getting player feedback. I think you first need to have a fairly decent testing client to get feedback from. And we've kind of seen Ashes of Creation and Intrepid Studios kind of pivot away from being as open as they were in the past, which I think is the right move. And that to me is what PAX Day seems to be doing. They're taking feedback and have even made a few changes based on feedback already. But they have held off on talking about the game until it was much closer to being in a testable state, and they're still withholding a lot of information about the game that's just not ready to show yet, which I think is the right choice. And back to Throne and Liberty, I don't have much hope for the AGS version being any different than this version because NCSoft has said many times, and again recently in the earnings call, that they're wanting to have the two clients be fairly similar. So while I've not always been the biggest fan of AGS, I'm not going to put any blame on them either for this. The blame rests firmly on NCSoft executives who completely dropped the ball. And quite simply, I don't think there's enough time to make the needed changes to fix all these issues. As I've said, I don't see them delaying this game again. I will of course play TL because it's free to play, it's a new MMO, and I play most new AAA MMOs. But it has gone from a game that I thought I might get 2 to 3 months out of to one I'm not sure I'll even be able to play for a week. So expect to not see very many TL videos from me going forward. Luckily, I'm covering a lot of upcoming MMOs, and that's by design because MMOs just have a high failure rate. And some of the ones I'm covering are trying some new things and trying to innovate, and that's always a risk, and there's always a risk of failure when you do this sort of thing. So there's a chance several of them could fail, just like TL, I think, is going to fail. But with so many promising Western-developed MMOs on the horizon, I think the future is still very bright for this genre. I would, however, be extremely surprised if any Eastern imported MMOs are the ones to really bring us out of these dark ages. I just don't see it happening. But the Western developed ones, I think some of those might actually succeed. I have a few more MMOs I'll be covering going forward since I won't really be covering TL nearly as much, and you'll find out about that fairly soon. I'll probably also list out the ones that interest me the most in a video. I did one of those about a year ago. It's probably time to update that video. And that's all I have for this video. I appreciate you guys watching all the way to the end. That definitely helps me out when you guys do that. And with that, guys, I'll see you in the next video.